The vast command center of the Krax Empire buzzed with activity. Hundreds of technicians worked at their stations, monitoring screens that showed distant stars and planets. General Tark stood tall in the center of the room, his gray skin reflecting the blue light of the main display. His four eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic image of a small blue planet. "Fascinating," he muttered, running a clawed hand over his chin ridge. This system was previously unmarked in our charts. Science Officer Mech approached, holding a data tablet. Unlike the general, Mech was smaller, with pale skin that seemed almost translucent under the bright lights of the command center. "General, our long-range scans have detected signs of intelligent life on the third planet," Mech reported. "They call themselves humans according to our intercepted communications." General Tark zoomed in on the holographic display, examining the planet more closely. He could see small satellites orbiting the world, primitive space stations, and evidence of cities on the surface. "These humans appear technologically primitive," Mech continued, scrolling through data on his tablet. "Their space capabilities are limited to their immediate orbital vicinity and a few outposts on neighboring celestial bodies." General Tark's mandibles clicked with amusement. In his 30 years of service to the Empire, he had overseen the conquest of 12 planetary systems. None had posed a significant challenge to Krax's military might. "Another world ripe for conquest," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Send a reconnaissance force to assess their military capabilities. The Empire expands, as it always has." Officers around him nodded in agreement. The Krax Empire had grown powerful by absorbing weaker species, taking their resources and technology. These humans would be no different. 3 days later, a small fleet of 5 Krax warships entered the human solar system. They moved cautiously, staying beyond the orbit of the planet the humans called Mars. Commander Locke, leading the reconnaissance mission, felt confident. His ships were equipped with the latest cloaking technology, making them nearly invisible to primitive detection systems. "Maintain stealth approach," Locke ordered. "Continue passive scans of human defensive capabilities." His crew obeyed, carefully mapping human installations throughout the system. They noted the positions of space stations, satellites, and the handful of small military vessels that patrolled near Earth. "Commander, we've detected an unusual energy signature from that human station," reported a sensor officer, pointing to a large orbital platform near Earth. Commander Locke frowned, his upper eyes blinking in concern while his lower eyes remained fixed on the display. "What kind of energy?" "Unknown, sir. It's unlike anything in our database. Power levels are fluctuating rapidly." The Krax battle computer processed the energy readings and flashed a warning. According to its analysis, the energy signature matched patterns similar to weapons charging in other civilizations. "They've detected us," Locke said, his voice tight with tension. "They're preparing to attack." In reality, the human space station was testing a new fusion reactor, creating energy spikes that the Krax systems misinterpreted. But Commander Locke had no way of knowing this. He immediately sent a priority communication to General Tark. Back at Krax Command, General Tark reviewed the data with growing anger. "They dare to prepare aggression against us," he hissed, his mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. "These primitives need to learn their place. Launch a preemptive strike against their outpost." Commander Locke received his orders and prepared his ships for battle. "Target the human station and fire on my mark." The 5 Krax vessels decloaked simultaneously, their sleek, insect-like forms becoming visible against the blackness of space. Their weapon systems hummed to life, energy building in their forward cannons. "Fire," Locke commanded. Beams of intense green energy lanced across the void, striking the human research station. The structure broke apart immediately, fragments spinning off in all directions. 200 human scientists and engineers died in seconds. Alarms blared across Earth's defense networks. Emergency meetings were called. Military commanders rushed to their posts. But the human fleet was scattered throughout the solar system, and most ships were days away from the attack site. Only one vessel was close enough to respond, the HMS Defiant, Earth's newest and most advanced warship. It had been on a shakedown cruise near the moon when the attack occurred. Captain Han stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the tactical display with calm intensity. She was in her 40s, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. Despite her small frame, her presence commanded respect from everyone on the bridge. "Report," she ordered, her voice steady. "The research station has been destroyed." Reply Officer Lai, his face pale with shock. 5 unknown vessels, design unlike anything we've seen before. They appeared out of nowhere and opened fire without warning. Captain Han nodded once, processing this information. "Are there any survivors from the station?" "Negative, Captain. No escape pods were launched." Han closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself one moment of grief for the lost lives. Then she straightened, her decision made. "Set course to intercept the hostile vessels," she commanded. "All stations report combat readiness." The crew moved with purpose, preparing the ship for battle. The Defiant was humanity's most advanced vessel, but it had never been tested in actual combat. Now it would face 5 alien warships alone. "Captain," said Communications Officer Jun, "Earth Command is ordering all available ships to respond, but the nearest reinforcements are 3 days away." "Then it's just us," Captain Han said, looking around at her crew. Their faces showed fear, but also determination. "We are the only ship in range. We will defend our people." The Defiant accelerated toward the Crack's vessels, its engines glowing blue against the darkness of space. Captain Han studied the alien ships on her display, looking for weaknesses, planning her approach. "They outgun us 5-1. Tactical Officer Bai noted. "Then we'll have to be smarter than them," Captain Han replied. "Prepare all systems. Let's show these aliens that humanity is not as primitive as they think." General Tark leaned back in his command chair, watching the approaching human ship on the main screen. The vessel was sleek and white, unlike the dark, angular designs of Crack's warships. It moved with surprising speed toward Commander Locke's fleet. "General, we're receiving live battle feed from Commander Locke," reported Officer Vec. Tark nodded, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Display it." The screen split to show Commander Locke's bridge. The commander stood rigidly at attention when he saw his supreme leader. "General, we have engaged the human research station as ordered," Locke reported. "A single human vessel has responded and is approaching our position." Tark's upper lip curled in amusement. "One ship. Do they not understand the power of the Crack's empire?" Commander Locke looked uncomfortable. "We are preparing to eliminate it now." On the screen, Tark could see the human ship growing larger as it closed the distance to Locke's vessels. It was smaller than the Crack's warships, perhaps a third of their size. "Open fire," Commander Locke ordered his fleet. All 5 Crack's ships fired simultaneously, their green energy weapons converging on the lone human vessel. Tark expected to see it explode into fragments, like the research station before it. Instead, his mandibles clicked in surprise. The energy beams struck some kind of barrier around the human ship. The barrier glowed blue where the weapons hit, but remained intact. Again, Commander Locke shouted. A second volley struck the human ship with the same result. The barrier flickered slightly but held firm. "Impossible," muttered Tark's tactical officer, Zin. His claw tapped rapidly on his console as he reviewed the data. "Their shield technology is unlike anything in our records. It appears to be adaptive, strengthening at the points of impact." General Tark leaned forward, his earlier amusement vanishing. How can a primitive species possess such technology? Aboard the HMS Defiant, Captain Han remained standing as the ship shook slightly under the alien attack. The bridge was bathed in red emergency lighting, but all systems showed green on the status displays. "Shields holding at 92%, reported Officer Ba. "The alien weapons are powerful, but our adaptive shielding is dispersing the energy efficiently." Captain Han nodded, studying the enemy ships on her tactical display. "What have we learned about their attack patterns?" Lieutenant Kim, the tactical officer, worked quickly at his station, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Captain, I'm noticing something strange. All 5 ships fire at exactly the same moment, with identical targeting solutions." "That's unusual," Han said, moving to look over Kim's shoulder. "Most fleet actions show at least some variation between ships." Kim nodded. "Their ships coordinate through a central command system. Each firing solution is calculated from the same source, probably their lead vessel. It's efficient, but predictable." Han finished for him. "And predictable means vulnerable. Connect the combat AI to the tactical systems." The Defiant's advanced artificial intelligence combat system began analyzing the Crack's attack patterns. Within seconds, it had detected the pattern and was calculating the next most likely moves. "The AI predicts their next volley will target our engine section," Kim reported. 87% confidence. Captain Han smiled slightly. "Redirect shield strength to the engines." When the Cracks fired again, the shields around the Defiant's engines glowed brightly but remained intact. "Now," Han ordered, "target the leftmost vessel's propulsion system. Precision strike only." The Defiant's weapons officer fired a brilliant blue beam that sliced through space and struck the Crack ship's engine section. The alien vessel spun slightly, its engines flickering and dying. Inside the damaged Crack ship, emergency lights flashed as the crew struggled to understand what had happened. "Engines offline," shouted the ship's engineer. "The human weapon somehow bypassed our shields and targeted our propulsion system specifically." Back on the Defiant, Captain Han was already selecting the next target. Second ship from the right. Same approach. Target propulsion only. Within minutes, 3 of the 5 Cracks vessels were drifting helplessly in space, their engines disabled but life support systems intact. On General Tark's command ship, the mood had shifted from confidence to confusion. The general's skin had darkened with anger as he watched the impossible unfold. "The human vessel is not attempting to destroy our ships," reported a confused Cracks officer, checking his readings again. "They are disabling them. Life support and essential systems remain functional." "Why?" demanded Tark. "Why not destroy them?" No one on his command staff had an answer. Commander Locke's face showed fear as he reported from his increasingly desperate position. "General, 2 more of my ships have lost propulsion. We cannot evade the human vessel's attacks. Their targeting is impossibly precise." General Tark slammed his fist against his armrest. "How is this possible? Your ships are the pride of the Cracks fleet. Their vessel's combat system appears to be predicting our attack patterns," Locke replied. "And their weapons technology. It penetrates our shields as if they weren't there." Tark stood up suddenly, his tall frame looming over his bridge officers. "This is unacceptable. The humans cannot possess technology superior to ours." "The evidence suggests otherwise, General," Officer Zinn said quietly, still reviewing the battle data. Tark's rage built as he watched the impossible unfold on the screen before him. The human ship moved with grace between his vessels, systematically disabling them one by one. Everything he thought he knew about human capabilities was wrong. "Call for reinforcements," he ordered, his voice echoing through the command center. "I want the full might of the Cracks Empire to crush this human anomaly." Across the Cracks communication network, the call went out. Every available warship was to converge on the human solar system immediately. On the Defiant, Captain Han received an update from her sensors officer. "Captain, we're detecting multiple hyperspace communications from the enemy fleet. They appear to be calling for reinforcements." Han nodded, her expression serious. "As expected, we've shown them we're not as primitive as they thought. The question is, how many ships will they send, and how quickly will they arrive?" Lieutenant Kim looked up from his station. "If their reinforcements are anything like these ships, we've proven we can handle them." "Don't get overconfident," Han cautioned. "We caught them by surprise this time. They won't make the same mistakes again." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "We've won the first battle, but I suspect the war has just begun. The dark space near Mars became crowded as Crack's warships appeared one after another. They came through bright flashes of light, their engines glowing green against the blackness of space. First, there were hundreds, then thousands, and finally 10,000 ships filled the area. The massive fleet stretched from Mars almost to Earth, their black hulls blocking the sunlight. On the bridge of his command ship, General Tark stood with his arms crossed, watching the gathering of his forces with satisfaction. This was the largest fleet the Crack's Empire had ever assembled for a single operation. "The full might of the Crack's Empire has arrived, General," reported Commander Vec proudly. 10,000 ships ready for your orders." Tark nodded slowly, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Excellent. And what of the human vessel that caused so much trouble?" "Our sensors detected it retreating toward the asteroid field between what the humans call Mars and Jupiter," Vec replied. "They appear to be hiding." General Tark made a sound that passed for laughter among the Cracks. "They were brave when facing 5 ships. Now they hide like prey animals when facing real power." Aboard the HMS Defiant, deep within the asteroid belt, Captain Han studied the sensor readings with a calm expression that hid her concern. The asteroid belt provided some cover, but the sheer number of enemy ships was overwhelming. 10,000 vessels, Officer Lai said quietly. "I've never seen anything like it." Captain Han turned as Communications Officer Park approached with new information. "Captain," Park reported gravely, "I've just received word from Earth Command. They acknowledge our situation and understand the threat. Every available ship is being recalled. Reinforcements are being dispatched, but they won't arrive for 3 days." The bridge fell silent. 3 days seemed like an eternity when facing such overwhelming odds. Captain Han nodded, absorbing this information. "Then we have 3 days to show the Cracks that humanity will not be conquered easily." "What can one ship do against 10,000? asked Officer Ba, voicing what everyone was thinking. "We can be smarter," Han replied. She turned to her science officer. "Any weaknesses in their fleet formation?" Science Officer Moon had been analyzing the Cracks fleet since their arrival. Their ships are organized in tight formations around command vessels. Each group seems to operate as a unit rather than independently. Captain Han thought for a moment. Their command ships must be broadcasting tactical data to the others. She moved to the communications station and studied the readings carefully. After several minutes, she pointed to a pattern on the screen. "There," she said. "Their command ships broadcast tactical data on specific frequencies. If we can disrupt those frequencies, we could break their coordination," finished Lieutenant Kim, understanding her plan. Captain Han smiled. "Exactly. We don't need to destroy their ships. We just need to blind them." The crew began preparing immediately. Engineers modified the Defiant's communication array to emit powerful jamming signals on the frequencies the Cracks used. Meanwhile, the tactical team planned quick hit-and-run attacks. In his command ship, General Tark grew impatient. "Why have we not found the human vessel yet? There is only one ship." "The asteroid field makes tracking difficult, General," explained his sensor officer. "There are thousands of large bodies, and the human ship's energy signature is similar to some mineral compositions in the asteroids." Tark's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Cowards," he declared. "Spread the fleet to encircle the asteroid field. They cannot escape." The massive Cracks fleet began to move, spreading out to form a ring around the asteroid belt. Thousands of ships took positions, their weapons ready. "They will have to come out eventually," Tark said. "And when they do, they will face the full power of the Cracks Empire." What the general didn't realize was that Captain Han had no intention of staying hidden. As the Cracks fleet spread out, they created gaps in their formation, gaps the Defiant could exploit. "Their fleet is spreading thin in Sector 7, reported Officer Lai. "We have an opening." "Take us through," ordered Captain Han. "Full power to engines, but keep weapons and shields at minimum until my command." The Defiant slipped out from behind a large asteroid and accelerated toward the gap in the crack's formation. By the time they detected the human ship, it was already passing through their line. "Target acquired," said Lieutenant Kim. "Communications array on the lead ship in range." "Fire," Han ordered. The Defiant's weapons lanced out, striking the command ship's communication array with surgical precision. The delicate equipment exploded, leaving the ship unable to coordinate with its battle group. Before the cracks could respond, the Defiant was already retreating back into the asteroid field, disappearing from their sensors. "What happened?" demanded General Tark when he received the report. "The human ship appeared briefly, attacked a command vessel's communication system, and vanished again," replied a nervous officer. "One ship damage. That's nothing," Tark dismissed. But within hours, the pattern repeated. The Defiant would emerge from the asteroids, target a command ship's communications array, and disappear before the cracks could mount an effective response. By the end of the first day, 23 cracks command ships had lost their ability to coordinate their battle groups. Confusion spread through parts of the fleet as ships lost contact with their commanders. General Tark watched the reports come in with growing frustration. How can one ship cause such chaos? They're not even trying to destroy our vessels. They're targeting our command and control systems specifically, his tactical officer explained. Without communications, our formations break down. The pattern continued through the second day. The Defiant struck quickly and vanished, always targeting communication systems. Some crack ships fired blindly into the asteroid field, but their weapons only struck rocks and ice. By the end of the second day, over 200 cracks command ships had been disabled. Entire sections of the fleet were operating independently, without coordination. General Tark paced his bridge, his rage building with each report of another disabled command ship. Finally, he could contain his anger no longer. He slammed his fist into his command console, cracking the surface. "How can one ship cause such chaos?" he roared. "Find them. I want every asteroid in that belt scanned. Use short-range fighters if necessary. Find that ship and destroy it." The general's order sent thousands of small fighter craft into the asteroid belt, searching for the Defiant. But the human ship was already implementing the next phase of Captain Han's plan. "They're sending in fighters," reported Officer Lai. "They're desperate to find us." Captain Han nodded. "Good. That means their larger ships are staying in formation. Prepare the next phase. It's time to show the cracks what happens when they threaten Earth." The Defiant moved silently through the asteroid field, using the larger rocks as cover. Captain Han stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display that showed thousands of small cracks fighters searching for her ship. The larger cracks warships remained in formation around the asteroid belt, waiting. "Their search pattern is predictable," said Lieutenant Kim. "They're checking each asteroid systematically, but it will take them days to cover the entire belt." Captain Han nodded. "We don't have days. Our reinforcements will arrive tomorrow, but by then, the cracks might have broken through to Earth." She turned to her engineering officer. "Are the quantum resonance mines ready?" Engineer Choi looked up from his console. "Yes, Captain. All 50 mines are prepared and loaded in the launch tubes." "But," he hesitated. "What is it, Choi?" Han asked. "The mines have never been tested in actual combat conditions," he explained. "They worked perfectly in simulations, but this technology is new." Captain Han understood his concern. The quantum resonance mines were Earth's newest defensive weapon. Each one was small, about the size of a fist, but contained advanced technology designed to disrupt enemy systems. "We have no choice," Han said firmly. "This is our best option to protect Earth." She studied the tactical display again, looking for a path through the cracks forces. After a moment, she pointed to a gap between two battle groups. "There," she said. "That's our route. Prepare to move on my mark." The crew readied themselves. Shields were brought to full power. Engines were primed for maximum output. The launch tubes containing the mines were opened. "Now," Captain Han ordered. The Defiant shot out from behind a large asteroid, accelerating rapidly toward the gap between the Crack's battle groups. Almost immediately, Crack's sensors detected the movement. "Human ship detected," reported a Crack sensor officer to General Tark. The general leaped from his chair. At last, all nearby vessels converge on these coordinates. Crack's ships began to move, turning toward the Defiant's position. But Captain Han had anticipated this response. "Deploy the quantum resonance mines," she ordered as the Defiant darted between the two Crack's battle groups. The mines launched from the Defiant, tiny metallic spheres that glinted briefly in the distant sunlight before their stealth systems activated, making them nearly invisible. They spread out, propelled by small thrusters, each one programmed to attach to a specific type of Crack's vessel. "Mines deployed," reported Lieutenant Kim. Moving to safe distance, the Defiant accelerated away from the area, drawing pursuing Crack's ships after it. Meanwhile, the mines silently attached themselves to key Crack's vessels throughout the fleet, focusing on command ships and communication relay vessels. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The Cracks continued their pursuit, unaware of the devices now attached to their hulls. Then Captain Han gave the order. "Activate the mines." Officer Choi pressed a command on his console. A signal went out from the Defiant, triggering all 50 mines simultaneously. The effect was not visible to the naked eye. There were no explosions, no destruction. But across the Crack's fleet, ship after ship suddenly lost their ability to communicate. The quantum resonance mines created a cascading failure in the Crack's communication network. Each mine generated a field that disrupted the specific frequencies the Cracks used for tactical coordination. Worse, the field spread from ship to ship, carried by the Cracks' own communication signals. Aboard his flagship, General Tark watched in horror as his integrated command system collapsed. The main display, which normally showed the position and status of every ship in his fleet, flickered and went dark. His communication officers frantically worked at their stations, trying to restore contact. "What's happening?" Tark demanded. "Unknown, General," replied a communications officer. "Something is blocking all tactical frequencies. We cannot contact any ships beyond visual range." "Ship after ship is reporting loss of tactical coordination," added another officer. "The effect seems to be spreading throughout the fleet." Tark slammed his fist on his armrest. "How is this possible? Fix it." But the Crack's technicians had never seen anything like the quantum resonance technology. They had no defense against it, no way to counter its effects. The Defiant, meanwhile, had stopped running. It turned to face the Crack's flagship directly. "General," his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Rek, reported hesitantly, "the human vessel is approaching under a communication flag." "Communication flag," Tark repeated, confused. In Crack's warfare, there was no concept of parley or negotiation once battle had begun. "They're broadcasting on an open frequency," explained Rek. "They wish to speak with you." Tark's mandibles clicked in anger, but he nodded. "Show me." The view screen activated, showing Captain Han's face. She looked calm and determined, not at all like someone facing a fleet of 10,000 enemy vessels. "General Tark of the Crack's Empire," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Your fleet is compromised. Your ships cannot coordinate their actions or communicate with each other. I offer you terms of surrender that will spare the lives of your soldiers." Tark couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Surrender? To a single ship?" he roared, his voice echoing through the bridge. "Never. All vessels converge on the human ship. Full attack." He turned to his communications officer. "Broadcast that order on all frequencies." The officer tried, but shook his head. "I cannot, General. Our transmitters are not functioning." Tark tried to grasp what was happening. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Crack's empire, had been rendered nearly useless by a single human ship. "General," Sub-Commander Rek said quietly, moving closer so only Tark could hear, "we cannot win this battle. Not today." Tark turned to stare at his second-in-command. "What are you saying?" Our ships cannot coordinate. We cannot concentrate our firepower. If we attack now, we will lose many vessels for no gain, Rek explained calmly. The human captain is offering terms. We should at least hear them. General Tark looked around his bridge. His officers avoided his gaze, but he could see the truth in their postures. For the first time in his military career, Tark faced a situation he could not overcome with brute force. He turned back to the screen, where Captain Han waited patiently for his response. "I will hear your terms," he said finally, each word painful to speak. Captain Han nodded. "We require all Crax vessels to power down weapons systems and withdraw beyond the orbit of Saturn. No Crax ship will enter the inner solar system until formal diplomatic relations are established between our peoples." Tark wanted to refuse, to fight to the last ship, but he knew it would be futile. Somehow, this single human vessel had outmaneuvered his entire fleet. "General," Rek whispered, "Earth reinforcements will arrive soon. If we cannot coordinate our fleet now." Tark raised a hand to silence him. He stared at the human captain, trying to understand how she had accomplished this impossible victory. "How?" he asked simply. "How did one ship defeat 10,000? Captain Han's expression softened slightly. "We used your strengths against you, General. Your ships are powerful but inflexible. They rely too much on central control. We simply removed that control." Tark nodded slowly, beginning to understand. In that moment, he realized there was much the Crax could learn from these humans. The massive Earth reinforcement fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system 3 days after the battle. 500 human warships, led by the flagship Unity, moved toward Mars where the Crax fleet waited. Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching the tactical display with interest. The Crax ships were in an orderly formation, their weapons powered down as agreed. In the center of the display was the HMS Defiant, looking small but proud. "Remarkable," Admiral Lee said, shaking his head in wonder. "One ship against 10,000, and the one ship won." The admiral was a tall man with gray hair and a serious face. He had fought in many battles during his long career, but he had never seen anything like this. "Captain Han requests permission to dock with Unity," reported a communications officer. "Granted," Admiral Lee replied, "and prepare the diplomatic meeting room. The Crax representatives will be coming aboard as well." An hour later, Captain Han arrived on the Unity. The crew members she passed in the halls looked at her with respect and admiration. Her battle against the Crax fleet was already becoming legendary throughout Earth's forces. In another part of the ship, a small Crax shuttle docked. General Tark, now a prisoner, stepped onto the human vessel flanked by guards. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Rek, followed behind him as the official Crax representative. General Tark looked around the human ship with interest. It was different from Crax vessels, brighter, with smoother lines and more color. He was taken to the diplomatic meeting room where Admiral Lee waited. "General Tark," Admiral Lee said, nodding to the alien commander. "I am Admiral Lee of Earth's Defense Force." Tark stood stiffly, his pride still wounded by his defeat. "Your Captain Han is not here." "She will join us shortly," Admiral Lee replied. "She is making her report about the battle." Tark studied the human admiral. "You could have destroyed us," he said, confusion evident in his voice. "Your ship disabled our vessels but avoided casualties whenever possible. Why?" Admiral Lee considered the question carefully. He knew his answer would shape the future relationship between humans and the Crax. "Captain Han followed our most sacred military principle. We fight when necessary, but we value all life, even our enemies," he explained. "She did what any Earth commander would have done." Tark's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among the Crax. "This is not how the Crax wage war. We believe that total victory requires total destruction of the enemy. And yet here you stand," Admiral Lee pointed out. "Your fleet intact, your soldiers alive, ready to begin diplomatic talks instead of being destroyed in a pointless battle." In another room, Sub-Commander Rek sat with Earth's military council, reviewing data from the battle. The human officers showed him detailed scans of the cracked ships and the weaknesses the Defiant had exploited. The human ship could have triggered a chain reaction in our power cores at any time, destroying thousands of vessels, Rek said, examining the data with surprise. Instead, they chose precision over power. Captain Han's mission was to defend Earth, not to destroy your fleet, explained General Min, the head of Earth's council. Those are not always the same thing. Rek nodded slowly. The cracks have much to learn from humans, it seems. Over the next few days, negotiations continued between the two species. Captain Han joined the talks, providing detailed explanations of her battle strategy when asked. General Tark was given comfortable but secure quarters on the Unity. He was provided with recordings of the battle from both human and Cracks perspectives. Each day, he spent hours watching these recordings, studying the moves and countermoves. At first, he watched to find flaws in the human strategy, to understand how he could have won. But gradually, his focus changed. He began to notice patterns in Captain Han's decisions. Time after time, the Defiant had opportunities to destroy Cracks vessels, but chose instead to disable them. When Cracks fighters pursued the human ship, it evaded rather than destroyed them. Even the quantum resonance mines were designed to disrupt systems, not to kill. For the first time in his military career, Tark began to understand that true strength might not lie in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when not to. It was a concept alien to Crack's military doctrine, but he could not deny its effectiveness. One evening, he requested a meeting with Captain Han. She arrived at his quarters, looking tired but composed after a long day of negotiations. "Captain," Tark said, nodding stiffly, "I have been studying your battle tactics." "And what have you learned, General?" she asked. "That I misunderstood humans from the beginning," he admitted. "I saw your restraint as weakness. I now see it was strength." Captain Han smiled slightly. "The easy path is always destruction, General. Creation and preservation. Those are the difficult choices. The Cracks have always believed that power comes from fear," Tark said. "That others respect us because they fear what we can destroy. And how has that worked for the Cracks Empire?" Han asked quietly. Tark was silent for a long moment. "We have many conquered worlds," he said finally, "but few allies." 2 weeks after the battle, representatives from Earth and the Cracks Empire signed a peace treaty. It was not just an agreement to end hostilities, but the beginning of a cultural exchange between the two species. The treaty included provisions for scientific cooperation, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. Earth would share some of its adaptive technologies, while the Cracks would offer their advanced propulsion systems. As the treaty was signed, General Tark stood at the back of the room, watching. He was still technically a prisoner, but his status had changed to military observer as relations improved. "A historic day," said Admiral Lee, coming to stand beside him. Tark nodded. "Yes, the beginning of a new era for the Cracks." "And for humanity," Lee added. The peace treaty signed between Earth and the Cracks Empire became the foundation for a new understanding between species across the galaxy. Other civilizations, watching the proceedings with interest, reached out to both humans and Cracks with diplomatic overtures. And it all began because one human ship chose to demonstrate that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, but their compassion. As the Defiant prepared to return to Earth, now accompanied by a full honor guard of Earth's fleet, Captain Han stood on her bridge one last time. She looked out at the stars, thinking about how close they had come to interstellar war and how they had found peace instead. "Captain," said Lieutenant Kim from his station, "the Cracks ships are forming an honor guard alongside ours. They're escorting us home." Han smiled. "Sometimes the greatest victories came not from what you destroyed, but from what you built." The end.